All right, guys, I'm Neily. I'm the president and founder of Parents Defending Education, your friendly swamp creature. And I'm joined today by three amazing parent activists from across the room. So I am going to start out by just letting them, we're going to go down the line. Everyone's going to have 5 minutes, and it's going to be a hard 5 minutes because I'm going to time them and I'm going to kick them off. But they're just going to talk about kind of their story, how they got to where they are, their activism journey, and what they're facing kind of in their own districts.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Barbie George, and I was born on an island in the Caribbean, so I'm Puerto Rican, Spaniard, French, Puerto Rican, and Sephardic. What a mixture, right? My mother moved to the mainland when I was 3 months old, and I had an incredibly privileged childhood. I grew up in the South Bronx, Harlem, and Newark, New Jersey. And I had a public school education, but public school education then and now are totally different. My journey took me to college, and I went to a college that nobody ever even heard of. And with that, I utilized that empowerment to be successful and to be an example to my 5 children. So I'm the mother of 5, I'm still alive, I survived, lived to tell, and I'm doing well. I'll be here all afternoon, thank you very much. And being the mother of 5, and I am number 14 out of 18 children. Wow. My father is 97 years old and served in the Korean War. And what I can say is, for a long time, I did not want to be in this. I totally just did not want to be a part of it. But my kids reminded me that I've always been a nudge. And my eldest reminded me, she goes, when I was 9 years old, I used to take a bus to the charter school. And the Board of Education decided not to utilize the buses anymore and gave the children city bus tickets. Now, I'm not going to put a 9-year-old on a bus in Jersey City, New Jersey to go across town by herself. So I became that nudge, and I went to the Board of Education, and they didn't care. And then I went to the press. And then I had all of the newspapers and all of the television listening to what I had to say and how I didn't want my child to be on the milk carton. And that blew up, and the buses came back. So my daughter was like, Mom, you've always been a nudge. Finally, we fast forward, God brings us to California. I said, this is not the place for me, I'm not gonna do anything. And God came calling, and on August 5th of 2019, I went into Cedars-Sinai Hospital. I signed contingency forms, and I was having a brain tumor removed. And on that day, I looked up into the heavens and I said, God, if you give me the opportunity to see my children grow, I promise I will no longer deny you, and I will do everything that I can in my own very insignificant way to make the world a better place. And so I was supposed to be in the hospital in intensive care for a month and in rehab for 6 months. I left in 3 days. And here I am. And the moment I left the hospital, I was off and running. And I was with Blexit, and I was with Legsit, and I was with Central Committee, and I became a delegate, and I serve on a charter school that caters specifically to foster and homeless children. I was a homeless child in Harlem. My mother was a substance abuser, and in 1980, the Port Authority opened up the books, and my mom became one of the first 20 women to be a longshoreman. So if you want to know about unions, trust me, I've seen it, and it can be very unsavory. And then as I progressed, my children got involved. I started seeing what happened. Of course, COVID is what really woke all of us up. And Moms for America came calling, and I said, can I do anything more? And I said, yeah, I can. So when people say that they don't have time, talk to me. I can put you to work, trust me. You guys watch television? Yeah? Do you really enjoy the commercials? You can make a phone call. You can call somebody, you can make phone calls, you can do phone banking, you can write letters, you can send an email. There is always something you can do. There are no excuses. The only thing that stops you or hinders you is the person who you watch as you're brushing your teeth in the morning. That's the only person who stops you. So I am not a victim. People told me I'm Afro-Latina, that I would never amount to anything. Well, I went from Newark to Newport Beach, but I earned it. Nobody gave it to me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cari Bartholomew. I'm the new state director for Utah's Moms for America. Barbie and I've met exactly one time, so that's interesting. I just ran for the state school board, and I almost unseated a 16-year incumbent who has the right pedigree and everything else. I got involved right after George Floyd when my son was told to identify as his oppressed side and reject his oppressive side. My son looks like anybody in the room who's straight off the boat from Ireland. So that was a little shocking to me that we would start dividing children up by color. So immediately I told the school, well, if you're going to start these clubs that are Kids of Color Club and Black Kids Club, well, I'll be their mentor since most of these kids are adopted by wealthy Google families in the neighborhood that I lived in Seattle. And so they didn't have a parent who looked like me or who came from my background, which I aged out of the foster system. I've never seen myself as a victim. I've been victimized, but you can be a survivor or you can be a thriver. And that's the way I'd always looked at life. And until 2020, that was a respectable way to look at life. And then all of a sudden, because I didn't want to lean into my victimhood, it became something that was, it put me on the outsides for a lot of people. When they started teaching our children that they were victims and that you're either a victim based on your race, and if you can't be one based on your race, then you need to move into gender, that became a problem for me. So pretty quickly we moved from Seattle to Utah. We moved to Utah and I realized that Utah is just as bad. And what I'm holding in my hand right here is a book that was published in Utah. It's a curriculum book that comes out next year. This is the first ethnic studies curriculum. Anyone who wants to is welcome to come and see it. It's the ugliest, saddest thing I've ever seen. And when I was given it, the person said, "My God, Cari, they're gonna teach our children to be okay with putting us in boxcars." So I cannot stop. It is inherent in me to do what is right. So when I was 8 years old, I walked away from my mother. I ran away to the police station. I was smart enough to do that. And so I've always tried to do what is right. I've always been a classical liberal. I'm open to listening to other people's points of views. They don't have to agree with me 100%. But when we start teaching our children that they must agree 100%, we have a real problem. So I've been speaking up and I've been encouraging other people. I just ran for state school board and the people, when I didn't win, a lot of people were very discouraged. And so I've said, well, what's the next thing we can do? And that's what we're doing. We just keep on moving. There you go. I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing.
My name is Kofi Montzka, and I'm a mom of 3 boys, 16, 18, and 20. My 20-year-old has special needs. He's in a diaper, and he's like a 2-year-old, maybe, if that, developmentally, and he's the cutest thing you ever saw in the whole wide world. And then, and I'm an attorney mom. I got involved with this movement just because, just as a parent, I would just confront the school when they made me mad. So when my 5th grader brought home an assignment telling him that he would face racism in every facet of his life, from education to healthcare to employment, I just thought, please. So I confront the school. I go have a conversation with the teacher. I have a speech that you probably heard the story, but in band class last year, they told the black boys, and the teacher said the black boys in class probably wouldn't live to their 50 because they'd be killed by police or white people. Another kid, my kid's not as super activisty like her kid. My kid's kind of one of them, they're kind of quiet under the radar, so he didn't even tell me until after I asked, but another kid who's Asian in the class recorded it and gave it to her dad, who I'm friends with. So I have the recording of the band teacher spending 20 minutes at the beginning of band every day indoctrinating the children. They gave a survey to the kids. Shoot, I forgot to time myself. But anyways, they gave a survey to all the kids of color. They asked them to stand up in 8th grade, and then they gave a survey to them, and they gave them all $10 if they would fill out the survey, asking for all their private information, their discipline history, the school totally broke the law by doing that without parental consent. And I don't like that they segregated the kids and then got all this information just from the kids of color, please. And then after George Floyd, they had discussions about what happened in Minneapolis, and they divided the kids into groups by the color of their skin. And so all of these instances, I'm just confronting the school about it, going and talking to teachers about it. I got involved with the school choice movement. I went on a walk during COVID. These people would do a 5-mile happy hour walk where they would drink out of flasks and walk. And so I went to this with my friend, and I met the head of the Senate Education Committee, Roger Chamberlain, and then I ended up somehow wrapped into the school choice movement, where I was speaking at the legislature like 20, 30 times. I held my kids called an insurrection, but it was just a rally at the governor's mansion, at Walz's mansion. And it was my 5 friends, the Exodus movement, 5 black ladies, and we fight to make a difference in education, and especially to help black kids with all of the disparities in education. So I did that, did a lot of work with school choice. It made it as far as it could, further than it's ever made it, but of course Walz did not pass it. I've spoken against ethnic studies. We did pass the ethnic studies bill in in Minnesota last year, so I spoke against that. And then I speak at school board meetings. We have groups. We're really organized in Minnesota, so we've got all these groups. A lot of them have the last name United, so we're Roseville United from my school district, Roseville. And so the parents kind of, all of us parents have joined together. We have meetings and we are more organized, but I do a lot of speaking at school board meetings, at least until they shut down public comment. So. And my Exodus group did an education expo where we held a panel somewhat like this, a day activity where we exposed parents to options to get out of public school. And I want to do one for college. That's next on my list. Like, what are options for kids like ours? Like, we're going to spend tons of money having our kids come back home to hate us and hate America. So how can we avoid that?
That's very efficient. You guys are all All right, so rather than having like go down the line every single time you ask a question, I'm just gonna start out by throwing out some questions. If you wanna jump in, cool. If you don't want to, then you don't have to. And then we'll open up the audience from there. So first question is just, how have you seen the parental engagement space change since you have been involved in your activism? I mean, I think back like 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, many of the groups in this room, many of the groups out there didn't exist. And so there's been a real steep learning curve. And there are some people who think like, I have this idea called education reform. And I know, some of the old timers who have been working on education reform for, 30, 40, 50 years are like, yeah, we got this. That being said, I think that obviously there's a lot of new blood and new insights that have come in, but there also has been some tension with people who feel that they're not getting credit. And so kind of what have you guys seen on the ground? Because you're all from very different parts of the country.
Sure, so I've lived in the classroom because I have an only child, and then we had foster kids. And so when, before 2020, it was totally normal to come into the classroom. And then in 2020, everything shut down, parents weren't encouraged to come. And what's been really interesting is to watch a lot of the parents who lived there, who were extremely involved. I was in the libraries, I was a para-educator, and I taught theater to the kids. And I became a villain overnight because my views were different than the ones they wanted. And so certain people were invited into the school, certain people were not. And if you became the people who were not, it was kind of crazy to see that, as those were the real moms. Those were the kids, the parents who really cared. And so we ended up having to take our movements outside and become villainized, even though we were literally the PTA moms beforehand. And then the PTA, honestly, in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, got taken over by the activists. So they've pushed for this agenda, and the schools really welcome them to come inside. And for us, we're educating from the outside. And the one thing that I think works with educating from the outside is that as more and more parents begin to get ostracized, the second that you say, this one thing is not okay, you are on the outs in these schools. And so the second that happens, if you're the people with the heart, and you're the people, that's what I call like Moms for America. We have the mother's heart. And so if you're the people with the heart, was that? Oh no, okay. Sorry. And you make people, first you have to make people comfortable. People are desperate for friendships because we have been so divided, right? So the first thing you have to do is connect with people. After you connect with people, then they're willing to talk about the issues. Once they're willing to talk about the issues, you light a fire and they are ready to fight.
Right? Anybody else have insight as to what you've seen from the ground?
Well, for me, I'm going to age myself right now. I'm way older than anybody thinks. So with the span of ages of my children, my eldest is 32. So the ages go 32, 26, 23, 19, 13. And the quality of education has definitely been in decline. I see that when my daughter was in school, she learned so much more. Well, my eldest, I have 3 daughters. So my eldest, when she was in school, it was so much more enriched. They actually paid attention to the academics. And now with my 13-year-old and my 19-year-old, I mean, I remember asking my 19-year-old about recent history. Do you know what Chernobyl is? Had no idea. I mean, just simple, basic things. Do you know what the Pythagorean theorem is? No clue. And I go, you just graduated high school. This is troubling. And look how quickly, a 32-year span, that's nothing. And so with COVID, as we all know, everyone was awakened, all of a sudden we're looking, and I feel that we're the ones who dropped the ball. This happened because we relied on other people to do what we should be doing for our children. And so now is the time for us not to hide our light under a bushel basket, is to go and to advocate for our kids in a positive, cognitive way so that we can have a seat at the table, so that we have that moment to speak to our trustees, to our superintendent, to our city council, to whomever we need to, and have the facts and have the data. Learn about your local school board. Find out how the reading, math, and science scores are, and you will see how poignant that is when you tell someone, you know, in this city, only 42% of the children are proficient in English. That changes minds, and that is not partisan, because our children are not partisan, they're children. And all we care about is for them to be successful in the future so that we can have a bright, successful future.
I'll just answer quickly. Parental engagement change, just that we're more involved. You go to a school board meeting, you meet I went to one meeting, you meet tons of people, and then we would speak at school board meetings, we would meet with people individually, we really tried to make change. But then they shut down public comment in the entire state practically. The Minnesota School Boards Association instructed them all to shut down public comment. So then we said, well, screw you. We're just going to run for school board then. Now you've driven us to this point. And so we've been challenging them, and it's been awesome to see the union have to spend all this money. Like, even if we lose, it's kind of a victory because they just spent $300,000 going against our candidates. And we have taken over some school boards. And so it's like, you know what, we have, in Anoka, we took over this world, it's 3-3, and the 3 threatened to not pass the budget. The whole school district, the largest in the state, was gonna shut down because they would not agree to pass the budget until they got some of the things they wanted. And they were like, no, you're bigots, blah, 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 you know, and I did go and speak there on their behalf, but I'm like, no, they begged and begged for you guys to make a change for years. You would not listen to them. And so now we're gonna go have a seat at the table. And now that we're here, you don't get to tell us, you know, you don't get to tell them how to vote. So, yeah, so we were very active. They shut us all down, and then now we're running for school board in droves. And we have like an organized group, the Minnesota Parent Association, that kind of helps people run for school board throughout our state, which is, it's good and bad, but they endorse people, and they're known to be very conservative. And so once that person has their endorsement, and if you're in a very liberal area, then, and so we asked for some of our people to not be in their voter pamphlet, and they would not listen to us. They said, oh, it's good for you, our voter pamphlet's amazing, and we know what's good for you. And so they kept their names in, and then they were automatically dubbed as conservative. We're in a very liberal district, and that did not help them, and it almost ruined one of the guys who's a black lawyer, his career. So it really makes me mad, like that's the infighting, but we don't listen to each other anyways.
No, I think that's a great insight in that, you know, one thing that has really struck me over the past couple of years is just how, you know, hyper-local education really is, and that's by design. And sometimes when you're trying to like affect national change, it's frustrating. But it is kind of the blessing, the curse of, all right, we have a 50-state system where some state superintendents are appointed, some are elected, some boards of education, same thing. And then how you affect change. And obviously, how you get something done in Taos is different than how you get something done in Tulsa. And the levers of power, but that at the end of the day, the grassroots activists on the ground are the ones who really know the sensitivities of like, that's not gonna pass muster here. And what you think, like, how you would run a candidate in Amarillo, Texas is way different than how you do it in Minneapolis. And so really to know and trust who the local activists are too. Kind of on that line, what are some challenges that any of you have faced in your work? Anything that's come up, and then how have you overcome that? I don't want this to be just like a gloom and doom panel. I feel like so many of us, it's so oppressive and sad all the time. So like, there was a challenge and then I blank.
Well, my challenge is vague. My challenge is discouragement, because we have a trifecta and balls, sometimes, never mind, I shouldn't say it, this is recorded. Mr. Walls, we have a nickname, but anyways, it's just discouraging, if you can imagine, like, getting anything done. Like, why am I fighting for school choice? It'll never pass. Why am I fighting? I mean, all of us feel like the school system's so big. Change will never happen. Like, so my biggest challenge is like even staying involved. Like, do I stay involved? My time, I have a lot of fun things I like to do in my life, and I don't like to waste my time. So I don't want to waste my time fighting these fools if there's zero chance of anything changing. And so I feel like that is my biggest challenge, like picking and choosing my battles, just trying to figure out when I should fight, when I should not, when is it worth it. But one of my speeches went viral at the legislature, but that was like, I'm taking a break. This stuff is stupid. I was like, I hate it. And then I went and spoke anyways, and it did make it still passed, but I've made so many connections, like so many good things have happened from the work I'm doing. For example, the school board speech that went viral, some lady found my speech, some guys found it, and they said to the black lady they work with, you should go meet this Kofi. And so she wanted to meet with me. She calls me out of the blue to meet with me. I'm like, oh, she's gonna try to kill me. Anyways, and we became friends, and she was a single mom of 4 kids, never married. She decided she wanted to get married because that was better. Like, she's made a difference. Now she's fighting with me in this fight. So it's like, you feel like you don't make a difference, but you do. I mean, her life is completely turned around because she saw that one school board thing. So it's like, you don't know. And then I just get encouraged by the fact that a lot of the kids, my kids tell me that the kids are not buying this stuff at all. Like my kid, that none of his, he says most of the girls are all crazed, but the boys are not at all. Like, they're on the right track when it comes to all of this stuff. They're with us on it. And that, so kids are waking up. And so that makes me encouraged. Like, these people have gone so over the deep end. They're so crazy that people aren't buying it anymore. So I feel like I have some encouragement, even though I get very discouraged all the time.
Yeah, our boys are based. For the most part, our boys are extremely based right now. And I think our girls are starting to wake up too. They don't like being lied to, and they're smart enough to recognize that that's happening. I think the hardest thing is that it's a hydra. You go out and you cut one piece off, you expose one thing, and you're like, yes, they get it! And then all of a sudden there's 15,000 other things that are coming out at you. But I think that every time, if we fall into that, and sometimes I do, sometimes I lay on the bed and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't do this anymore. But to me, every single time, every time I don't post on Facebook prolifically or whatever, somebody says, hey Cari, what's going on? I missed your comments. And those little things are little bits of light in their lives, and they need that, and we need that. We need the encouragement of knowing that our words are actually hitting home. And I like being the smartest person in the room. I'm not gonna lie. It's hilarious to me because in Utah, there's this huge elitist, we went to this school, BYU, we went to this school and we're so proper and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, here I am, this streetwise girl who actually reads. And I love being able to tell people, look, if I can do this with my crazy ADHD brain, if I can do this, then so can you. And also being able the kids I get to reach, I think, is probably the most important thing. And I tell them about the Hydra, like literally, I will show them the big dragon thing with the multiple heads. And I'll be like, so this head is DEI, and this head is SEL, and this head is CRT. Now let's talk about it to fourth graders. Yes, I do.
For me, one of the greatest challenges in California is having a New York accent. No. Yeah. But truthfully, it's my heart for the underserved communities, because underserved communities are always underinformed. And the apathy that there is for actually, everyone wants, how come the underserved, they don't get it, they don't listen. How many of you have gone to the underserved communities and reached out? How many spend time? I do backyard town halls in Santa Ana in gang territory. I go to Compton, Stockton, East LA, Oakland. I go to all of those places because in those communities, though all we hear about is the bad things, there are many amazing people, and you cannot hinder the potential of any child. But with these ideologies, that does hinder our children. If your child is being told that they can't be successful because they speak another language, or their skin color is this, or their background is that, then what are we saying? It's condescending, to tell you the truth. I'm actually offended when they say they want to dumb down the tests. I'm offended when they say, we need to help you so that you can get that job. No thanks. I want you to hire me because I am the best person, not because you think I need help. And so that's one of the greatest challenges, but I'll tell you one thing, the one thing that I'm doing is positive. My husband and I, one of the things that we are really, really dedicated to is to put a new face on minorities and underserved people, because I came out of the hood. I mean, I'm talking the hood. And imagine being a girl growing up in Newark, 14 years old, with a mohawk, okay, in the height of breakdancing and everything. I'm the girl with the mohawk and a Reagan shirt, okay? Talk about having guts. Talk about having guts. But the one thing that I see that the ideologies and the victimization is teaching our children is how not to be resilient. We need to be able to cope. We can't, sugarcoat. We have these kids in school and something happens and we bring them puppies, kittens, coloring books, and snacks. But guess what? They graduate from high school. Your boss is not going to give you puppies, coloring books, and snacks. It's not going to happen. We need our children to be equipped with the tools that they need to have a bright prospective future. So we have to stop making them victims, tell them that they're victors, and that they can accomplish anything that they set their mind to. We have to break that narrative of victimization. That's number one. And if everyone in this room just spoke to one person, believe me, we're going to make a difference.
I feel like I could just end the panel now. All right, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open up to the audience. What advice would you give to a person who is just starting out in this advocacy space? We're all a little bit battle-hearted, a little bit cynical at this point. Maybe some of us send fewer Christmas cards than we used to. And that's fine. Those people don't need those cards. But what would you tell somebody, who is kind of getting off the ground, right? They're about to take that first step into the arena, and it's scary. What do you tell them?
Yeah, I tell them to do anything. Just start. Last week was our launch in Utah for Moms for America, and this young woman with a 5-month-old baby came up to me and said, "What can I do?" And she was just like, I'd be overwhelmed to do this. And I did. Put your child in the stroller. Put your child in the stroller. Invite other people to go for a walk with you, and tell them about how you came here from Cuba. Tell them about your story and why you love this country. It is that simple to have a little tiny conversation. They do not need to be well versed in everything. They need these little tiny nuggets of information that make them go, well, how do you know about that? Then you're like, oh, here's a podcast. Oh, have you heard about James Lindsay? You can do whatever to get people started. And then once they go down that deep, dark hole, well, then you're there to guide them along. but they've got to take the first little step wherever they're at.
Anybody else?
Well, I can say you can start with, I just feel like with this battle with the schools, I feel like it's partly the schools, but partly parents. It's whenever I'm in this battle, it's hard for me to hardcore pound on the schools because, and then before I speak, I need to, especially to schools or whatever, like acknowledge that parents have a huge role too, even bigger than the schools. And so I think that we all need to stay focused on that. And so I would tell people who are annoyed by all of this, just make sure you're teaching your kids the right things, because my kids are not on that train. Like they are set, like thank God. You do your best, there's no guarantees, but mine are not. I've been disciplined here on my speech by saying the word woke, but I have no other name for it. But they're not on that racism train, that side of the block. But so anyway, so educate your kids and just talk to teachers and speak up. So when the band teacher told my kids about that they were gonna die, whatever, and I had the recording of him, I went and had an hour-long meeting with him and told him he needs to stop that crap. And then he did. Like, he actually stopped. Like, one more time he mentioned something cautiously because he knew I was on his tail. But, I mean, what was I really gonna do to him? You know, like, I wasn't gonna beat him up or whatever. But the point is I spoke up, and it made a difference where he was watching his mouth because he knew students might be recording. He knew they were going home to mom and dad and telling them. So I say speak up and be kind about it. Like, I mean, I do get mad if you've ever watched any of my speeches. I feel bad that I'm on the civility track now talking about that because, I mean, the only time I can ever speak eloquently is when I'm mad. So anyways, like I'm mad at these people telling my kids they're victims when, you know, I grew up with a drug addicted mom and my dad went to prison. I've had a lot of hardship in my life and nobody's gonna tell my kids who have it real good that they can't make it. Even if they were in those circumstances, they could make it. So I get really, really mad. But I try to be nice, you know? And so it was a testament to me that when I was out running at Christmas time, the superintendent was walking past me and she stopped me and she said, "Kofi," and I'm like, "Who are you?" You know, you see people out of context. And her and I have had some intense conversations. But she stopped me and said, "Merry Christmas" to me. And I was just shocked that she didn't view me as the enemy. And so whatever my approach is working, because it's not my job to be evil. It's not my goal to be evil to people. And so I felt heard. So yeah, educate your kids and talk to teachers, talk to the superintendents, and do it in a kind way where you can kind of maintain relationships and be heard.
Can I say one more thing on that?
Absolutely.
Just when she said educating your kids is absolutely vital, but also being their one person, being the person that they think is the coolest, that you are there for them all the time, that you're their best friend. And you might think that your kids will think that is the dorkiest thing ever, but they don't. Like, they really do love the fact that we're there, and especially when the schools are starting to tell them, who's your one person outside of your family? Who's that one, you know, who's your trusted adult, instead of having it be your mom or dad. So we need to really invest. It's very easy to check out and to think, well, our kids have their earbuds in and they've got their phones and, you know, they're fine doing whatever they're doing downstairs. But like sending them memes and jokes, and they love it. And then you stay close to them, and that's really, really important.
And what I would like to add is it starts with us. It starts with each and every one of us, that person that we look at in the mirror. What are you doing to make a difference? So when you want to get started on this journey, first of all, find what your passion is. If it's school board, educate yourself on it. Know the issues, know what's going on locally. The things that affect our lives the most start at the local level. Everyone puts a lot of attention to the national things, but if your road needs to be repaved, it's done by the local level. And if the school board needs to be reformed, it starts at the local level. So educate yourself, educate your children, and actually, you know, we need to stop letting others do what is our job. We are the parents. These are our children. Sit down with them, let them know these are our values. Perhaps they say this, but those are their values, and our values are as such. And if we can do that, and we can do that consistently, we will be effective and we will be successful.
Well, with that, I would like to open up to the audience. I'm sure you all have lots of questions for our talented panel. So it looks like Alina is the first one.
Thank you, Nikki, and to all three of you for some very articulately put thoughts. My question is around the idea that although our ethnic identity is not our only identity, it is certainly a big part for many of us, I think, of what our identities are. I can tell you that as somebody who's Jewish, one of my biggest challenges is advocating for the viewpoints that we're talking about within my own community. And my own opinions lie on the periphery of that community in the sense of what I think the solutions are. I'm going to venture a guess that the very articulate thoughts that you're presenting here lie on the periphery somewhat of your ethnic communities. I'm sure you're part of many different communities, but I'm talking specifically of your ethnic communities. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you have faced in that respect and how you have dealt with those challenges?
So that's not I live in Utah. So there's not a big community there. And honestly, I find it's hard to explain in that some people might write me off as a token because I speak a lot for my community is a rural community out in the middle of what used to be nowhere, but is now New California. But what I really speak for are the children in my classroom. So I don't speak towards race, except for me, race is it's literally just the color of my skin. I know that there are people who see me a certain way, and that actually hasn't played a huge benefit for me. There have been people who've been like, oh, you can speak for us because we can't say what you can say. But more than that, believe it or not, in my religious state, I get more of, she's the house N-word. That's the reality of what I get usually when I speak. And the thing is that that's just not where I come from. I have children in my class right now who are writing, when I tell them, let's write our perfect utopia. And I want to be super clear since this is being recorded. They write in really, like a few of them were writing with a pencil really, really hard. No gay and no trans. And I'm in the classroom realizing that these bad policies are turning our children into bigots. And I'm not okay with that. So I'm having to talk to kids where I'm thinking they're gonna say, we don't wanna have to go to bed. Instead they're saying this because they have a teacher who comes into class and completely messes with their cultural beliefs. The beliefs that their parents tell them, that XY, XX, that's what it is. And then they come into class and they're supposed to call Mr. Smith Miss Sunshine. And so trying to advocate for them, I look at us as human beings. I know that might sound like a cop-out, and I know that there are people who call me the N-word, et cetera, whatever. But I look at the world as human beings. If you take an apple and you cut it in half on two sides of the apple, I don't see my black side more powerful than my white side. I don't see the world that way. And I think for the majority of the classical liberals in the world, we don't see the world that way. And it's hard to have that pushed back on us and be forced to do it when we don't want to.
Well, I'm a little different. Like, I don't know. I see there are great disparities in the Black community, and especially in our state, it's terrible, and I want to focus on fixing it. I've always been that way since I was a little girl, and that's the way I stay. And and I'm not well received by Black people in general. They're very mean to me. But like my friend Keisha, who's now one of my best friends, we have the same birthday, exactly 10 years apart. But anyways, so And then through Take Charge, which is a group for faith, family, and education, through Kendall Qualls leads that. A lot of you may have heard about because he's taken it around the nation. But we have so many people a part of that who are people of color, Black people in Minnesota who've been a part of it, who are changing their minds. We just had an event the other day, and there were 2 Black people at our table, and they were kind of new to the organization. And as Kendall was talking, they were nodding and and so excited. And so it's happening like one by one. But in general, when Black people hear me, they're very, very mean. And so I am trying to figure out a way, because I feel like if the problem is we need to fix disparities and not rely on white people or some system to change before we change, then we need to have some conversations with each other. And if there's some deal in our community about airing our dirty laundry, which I was just talking to you about, it does make me a little uncomfortable when people go up and talk. Like if I were to speak and say, Black people got all these problems, they suck. I don't know, there's just something about it that rubs me the wrong way. And if the people I need to reach, I'm not gonna go and just put them down and trash them up. Yes, people need to be told hard truths, but you don't trash anyone up if you wanna be heard. So what I'm working on is figuring out how to craft my message so that I'm better heard by those people. So I'm preparing a list on why these illiberal policies, all they do is hurt us, and they're anti-Black. So we can have a Black off and see who's most Black. Let's have a Black off, let's go. And I'm gonna be ready. So anyways, so that's how I feel. So I do feel, so it is hard, but I do think the discussions need to happen internally, especially with the message I'm preaching, that they're not our problem. We can do this, we have agency. Well, I need to be talking to them about it, and it is hard to get in. Kendall tried to start a school in the inner city, and they said, no, you ran for governor as a Republican, we want nothing to do with you. When he's going into the inner city trying to start a school to help these people, to help our people, we're all, so anyways, it's challenging.
For me, the challenge is being multi-ethnic, multiracial, and not being Spanish enough, not being Black enough, not being this enough, not being that enough. What I like to do when I go into communities is find the things that we have in common. Let's find that common ground and build from there. And if we do that, we will see that we have far more in common than we have as far as differences. We have children. We love our children. We love our children. Can we start with that? And what is best for our children? And make it grow from there. You plant that seed and then nurture it. So when people are like, well, what about this, what about that? I don't know if any of you all recall having a multicultural fair at your school where everybody brought food or just wore their native dress, things like that. We can celebrate our differences without having to vilify ourselves to each other. One group is this and one group is that, and they don't like this and they don't like that. Guess what? How about I say, perhaps, sir, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? You, right here. You right here.
Frank, it's you. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
Vanilla. Perfect. I mean, vanilla. Awesome. I'm gonna say Rocky Road. Now, is your flavor better than my flavor? Does it matter? It's all ice cream. How about we start with there? That we all like ice cream and start building from there and not make it contentious. Because that's what the bottom line is. They want to divide us. In California, many places are self-segregated. I come from New York. Everybody's down with the swirl. We're all cool. We're hip-hopping and eating gizzards, so we're having a great time, right? But here, everyone is in their own communities, and I go to those communities and they're, they are gobsmacked. But if we are consistent and we consistently show up, then we're gonna make that difference and we won't seem so different to each other. When
Right, we gotta go to the next one because it's 3 minutes
I
left.
have this last thing I really have to say. When I had my brain surgery, I needed to receive blood products. Not one time did I ever ask what race was the blood that I received. And that's what really matters.
All right, we have time for one more or two if you're very, very fast. Who's the last one? We could all just make fun of Frank and his ice cream. All right. All right, Frank fights back.
All right. So, how do you? Yeah, it's also an Alina's question. How do you retain the volunteers to join your fight?
How do you retain your volunteers to join your fight, or how do you find volunteers to join your fight?
You just find them. Like, you go to a school board meeting, you go somewhere and you talk, and then people flock to you after and you exchange phone numbers. And most of the people that have helped us are not even parents, they're just community members who really care, the people who've been just like in the fight. So that's how I found I've been fighting on a state level for school choice. I'm like, I've never tried in my school district and I don't even want to. I'm sure it's a lost cause. I went to one meeting, I met like 10 people. And then we started our group the very next week, Roseville United. So you go and you speak up and then people find you.
I think you serve and also you respond with grace. Because when people see grace, when they're expecting vitriol, they are drawn to you.
The messaging needs to be positive, and you definitely need to let people know what the goals are, the end goals, and how their activity and how their being part of it will make a difference. See, people feel like, oh, I don't have anything to offer. We all have something to offer. And if we encourage people and say, you know what, you have great gifts, help us. We can make a difference if you help us and you join us, and together we're gonna accomplish amazing things.
All right, 1 minute left, lightning round. What are 2 issues you're keeping an eye on for 2025? Anything, SEL, race.
Community schools.
Oh, yes.
Community schools are coming, and if we're not careful, we're in big trouble. There are some community schools that have from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., they will have your child.
This is not lightning, you got a second one too.
Okay,
Number
second
2.
one.
We'll follow up after. Number 2.
Number 2 is consistent parental involvement. Consistent, not one and done. Actually maintaining that consistency.
All right, Cari.
Social and emotional learning and the weaponization of empathy.
Kofi.
I can't beat that fast.
All right, well, everybody please go and find Barbie afterwards. You can learn about community schools if you don't know. Thank you.